I was standing beside the dessert table when my mother laughed loud enough for half the engagement hall to hear her. "Oh, please," she said, waving her champagne glass. "If she really had a fiancé, don't you think we would have met him by now?" A few relatives chuckled. Someone whispered, "Maybe he's shy." My father didn't even look embarrassed. He leaned back in his chair, smiling like he was enjoying a private joke. "She always had an imagination," he added casually. "Since childhood." The word imagination landed heavier than an insult. Across the hall, my cousin Mira glowed under warm golden lights, showing off her diamond ring while guests congratulated her fiancé, a finance director from a respected family. Every introduction included his title, his income bracket, his future promotions. And then there was me, the daughter who supposedly invented a fiancé to hide failure. I kept my posture straight. I didn't argue. I didn't defend myself. I just lifted my glass of sparkling water and smiled politely, while my parents continued dismantling my dignity in front of relatives, family friends, and strangers. Someone asked loudly, "So where is this mysterious man?" My mother laughed again. "Oh, he's probably stuck at work, wherever imaginary men work." More laughter, phones recording, eyes watching. I felt the humiliation settle slowly, like cold rain soaking through fabric. But I stayed calm, because unlike everyone in that room, I already knew how this evening would end. And I knew something they didn't. My fiancé was on his way. Before I continue, I'm curious. Where are you watching from tonight? And what time is it? If stories about quiet strength and unexpected justice resonate with you, please take a moment to like and subscribe to my channel. It's free. And it helps more than you think. Now, let me explain how things ever reached that moment. I'm the oldest daughter, 30 years old, the responsible one. At least that's how it started. Growing up, my parents measured success very clearly. Status, income, reputation, and marriage alliances. Love was acceptable, but only if it came with social elevation. My younger cousins married doctors, engineers, entrepreneurs. Engagement parties looked like business mergers disguised as celebrations. I took a different path. I worked in urban planning, stable, meaningful work, but not glamorous. My salary was comfortable, not impressive. My lifestyle was quiet. To my parents, quiet meant underachieving. They never said it directly at first. It appeared in small comments. "You're smart, you just lack ambition. You should network more. You don't meet influential people." Every family gathering became an evaluation. Who earned more? Who married better? Who advanced faster? And slowly I became the comparison example, not the failure, but the disappointment. It began about a year before Mira's engagement. My parents started introducing me to men. Not dates, assessments. Each meeting felt like an interview conducted by my mother. What is his salary? What properties does his family own? What are his long-term prospects? One evening after dinner, my father said something that stayed with me. "You're reaching an age where choices become limited." I remember placing my fork down carefully. "I'm not desperate," I said calmly. He nodded, but not kindly. "That's easy to say when someone hasn't chosen you yet." That was the first time I understood something uncomfortable. They weren't worried about my happiness. They were worried about appearances. Around that same time, I met Daniel. We met through a city redevelopment project. He was consulting on infrastructure logistics, quiet, observant, and extremely private. He didn't talk about money. He didn't flaunt connections. He listened more than he spoke. Our first conversation lasted 3 hours. He asked questions no one had ever asked me. What makes you feel peaceful? What do you want your life to look like when no one is watching? It felt grounding. We started seeing each other quietly, not secretive, just private. Daniel traveled often for work. Sometimes he disappeared for weeks due to confidential projects. He avoided social media entirely. When my parents asked about my dating life, I simply said, "I'm seeing someone." They immediately demanded details. Company name, family background, income level, assets. Daniel asked one thing of me early in our relationship. "Until certain contracts finalize, I prefer staying out of public attention." I respected that, so I didn't push. And that decision accidentally created the biggest misunderstanding of my life. At a family dinner 6 months later, my aunt asked casually, "So when do we meet this boyfriend?" I smiled. "Soon." My mother exchanged a look with my father. That look said everything. She's making it up. After that, small jokes began appearing. Is he real? Does he live in another country? Maybe he's an online romance. At first, I laughed with them. Then the jokes sharpened. My parents began telling relatives I was being sensitive about relationships. They implied I had been rejected repeatedly. They framed my privacy as embarrassment. And slowly, the family narrative changed. I wasn't private. I was pretending. 3 months before the engagement party, things became worse. My parents invited me over for dinner. The atmosphere felt formal. My father spoke first. "We think you should stop telling people about this imaginary fiancé." I blinked. "I never said imaginary." My mother sighed dramatically. "Sweetheart, we're trying to protect you from embarrassment." I stayed calm. "He exists." "Then bring him," she replied instantly. Daniel was overseas at the time. "I will," I said. They exchanged another look. That same look again, disbelief, pity, and something harsher. Disappointment mixed with shame. The financial threat a week later, my father called. He spoke in a tone he normally used for business negotiations. "We've decided to adjust our financial support." I frowned. "What support?" "The apartment assistance. Future inheritance considerations." I went very still. He continued, "We cannot reward irresponsible decisions. If you're refusing serious marriage opportunities for a fantasy relationship, you need to stand independently." Translation: prove your fiancé exists or lose family backing. I didn't argue. I didn't beg. I simply said, "Okay." That surprised him more than resistance would have, because in that moment something inside me shifted. I stopped trying to convince them. Quiet preparation that night, I called Daniel. I explained everything. The jokes, the humiliation, the financial cutoff, the engagement invitation where my parents planned to clear the misunderstanding publicly. He listened without interrupting. Then he asked gently, "What do you want to do?" Not what should we do, what I wanted. I thought carefully before answering. "I don't want revenge," I said. "I just want the truth to arrive at the right moment." There was a long pause. Then Daniel said, almost amused, "I think we can arrange that." He didn't explain further, and I didn't ask. For the first time, I chose patience instead of defense. I attended family gatherings. I endured jokes. I allowed assumptions to grow. Because I realized something powerful. People reveal their real beliefs when they think you have no power. And my parents were revealing everything. When Mira announced her engagement, my mother called immediately. "This will be a big event," she said. "Many important families attending." I heard the hidden message, "Don't embarrass us." She added casually, "Maybe don't mention your fiancé this time." I smiled into the phone. "He might come." Silence. Then a short laugh. "Yes, of course." Word spread quickly through the family. Apparently, I was planning a dramatic appearance with my fictional partner. Relatives began anticipating entertainment. By the time the engagement day arrived, I wasn't just attending. I was the evening's side attraction, which brings us back to that moment, standing near the dessert table, listening to my parents laugh about my imaginary man. Guests gathered closer. Someone asked, "Did he at least send flowers?" My mother smirked. "We checked the entrance." "Nothing," another relative added. "Maybe traffic stopped the invisible car." More laughter. I felt dozens of eyes waiting for me to crack, to cry, to admit defeat. Instead, I checked my phone quietly. One unread message. "Daniel. Landing in 5 minutes." I locked the screen and placed it back in my purse. Across the hall, my father raised his glass. "Well," he announced loudly, "until this mysterious fiancé appears, we'll assume our daughter is still single." Applause. Laughter. Humiliation carefully packaged as humor. I breathed slowly. And then, outside the venue, the faint, rhythmic sound of rotor blades began cutting through the evening air. At first, no one noticed, but the sound grew louder. Guests started looking toward the windows. Music faltered. Conversations paused. My mother frowned. "What is that noise?" I didn't answer. I simply turned toward the entrance doors as the entire hall shifted with curiosity. Because at that exact moment, the evening stopped being their story, and started becoming mine. The helicopter sound didn't stop. It hovered somewhere above the venue, heavy and intrusive, vibrating through the glass panels of the engagement hall. But inside, people kept laughing, because no one believed it had anything to do with me. My aunt leaned toward my mother and whispered, not quietly enough, "Maybe she hired entertainment to distract everyone." My mother chuckled. If she could afford that, she wouldn't still be renting. Another wave of laughter rolled through the group. I felt heat rise behind my ears, but my expression didn't change. Years of practice. Stay composed. Never react first. My father motioned me closer with 2 fingers like he was summoning an employee. "Come here," he said. Guests leaned in automatically. Conversations faded. I could feel curiosity sharpening in the air. He smiled politely, the public version of him. "We're just worried about you," he announced to the crowd. "Families shouldn't encourage delusions." Someone murmured sympathetically, "Poor girl." My cousin's future mother-in-law added softly, "It happens when women wait too long." My mother sighed dramatically. "She refuses perfectly respectable proposals. 1 banker, 1 surgeon, and for what?" She shrugged. "An invisible fiancé." The word invisible spread quickly. I heard someone behind me whisper, "Maybe she got scammed online." Another voice, "Or maybe no man wanted her." The comments stacked quietly, one over another, each sharper than the last. My mother wasn't finished. She took my arm, pulling me gently but firmly toward the center of the hall. "Let's settle this today," she said brightly. The engagement photographer instinctively turned his camera toward us. "Great. Documentation." My father raised his voice. "Sweetheart," he said, using a tone he only used when pretending kindness, "tell everyone his name again." I answered calmly. "Daniel." A few guests nodded mockingly. My aunt laughed. "Daniel what?" I paused. Daniel had asked for discretion about certain details, not secrecy, timing. "I'll introduce him when he arrives," I said. The reaction was immediate. Snickers, someone clapped sarcastically. My father shook his head slowly. "You see, no last name, no family background, nothing verifiable." He turned to the guests. "This is why we stopped financially supporting her." Gasps, my stomach tightened. That part was new. He hadn't said that publicly before. My mother nodded solemnly. "We had to teach responsibility. We can't keep funding fantasies." The humiliation shifted from teasing to judgment. Now I wasn't just unmarried. I was irresponsible, dependent, a burden. An older relative leaned closer to my parents. "So inheritance plans changed?" My father didn't hesitate. "Yes, until she makes mature life decisions." My mother added quickly, "We can't let family assets go to someone who might marry anyone." Anyone. The word carried weight. Meaning, someone without status, someone beneath them, someone they couldn't show off. They weren't hiding it anymore. This wasn't concern. It was reputation management. My existence was an investment portfolio to them, and I had failed to produce acceptable returns. My cousin Mira approached, smiling sweetly. "You know," she said loudly enough for nearby guests, "you could have just said you're focusing on your career. Nobody would judge." Her fiancé laughed lightly. "Yeah, fake boyfriends usually work better in college." The group laughed again. I felt dozens of eyes waiting for reaction, waiting for tears, waiting for collapse. Instead, I nodded politely. "You look beautiful tonight," I told her. That unsettled them more than anger would have, because calmness made them uncomfortable. They wanted proof I was embarrassed. My parents exchanged a glance. Then my father made a decision. "You know what?" he said loudly. "Let's help her move forward." He turned to a nearby guest, a man in his late 40s wearing an expensive suit. "This is Mr. Kim," my father said. "A successful businessman, recently divorced." The implication hung heavily. Mr. Kim smiled in a way that felt transactional. "I've heard a lot about you," he said, scanning me like property. My mother added, "He owns 3 properties downtown." Guests nodded approvingly. Status restored. Solution presented. I realized then they weren't just humiliating me. They were negotiating my replacement future in public. I kept my voice steady. "I'm engaged," Mr. Kim chuckled. "Of course." Not belief, dismissal. My aunt leaned close and whispered harshly enough for others to hear. "Stop lying." It's becoming sad. Another relative added, women who pretend relationships usually end up alone. My mother sighed loudly. She's always been stubborn. Then came the sentence that cut deeper than all the others. My father said quietly but clearly, we did everything for her and she still became a failure. The word failure echoed louder than the helicopter outside. Conversations stopped. Some guests looked uncomfortable. Others leaned closer, drawn to the spectacle. I felt something inside me settle, not anger, clarity. They had crossed from embarrassment into disownment, and they believed there would be no consequences. The helicopter sound grew louder again. This time, windows rattled. Guests began walking toward the terrace doors. Security staff moved quickly outside. My cousin frowned. Is that for someone important? My mother adjusted her sari, immediately alert. VIP arrival meant opportunity, status, connections. She whispered excitedly to my father, maybe one of Mira's in-laws invited someone influential. They forgot about me instantly. I stood slightly behind them, watching, waiting. My phone vibrated again. Daniel, 2 minutes. I didn't smile. I didn't react. I simply slipped the phone back into my purse. My mother turned back suddenly, as if remembering unfinished business. One last thing, she said sharply. After tonight, stop telling people you're engaged. It damages our reputation. I met her eyes. I won't lie, I replied calmly. Her expression hardened. Then don't come back home asking for help. My father added, cold and final. You chose this imaginary man over your family. A silence followed. Heavy, public, intentional. They had officially cut ties, right there, at a celebration in front of everyone, and they felt justified. Around us, guests whispered, she ruined her future. Such arrogance without achievement. Poor parents. I absorbed every word, every expression, every assumption, because each one would matter in a few minutes. Outside scene was something like that. The helicopter finally landed. The sound faded into a low mechanical hum. Security rushed toward the entrance. Event coordinators straightened decorations nervously. Someone said, there must be a VIP guest. My mother instantly repositioned herself near the entrance, smile prepared, posture perfected. My father adjusted his jacket. Greed replaced irritation. Status radar activated. They were ready to impress whoever stepped inside. No one looked at me anymore. I had already been dismissed from relevance. And that was exactly the moment everything began to change. The main doors opened slowly. Cold evening air entered the hall, conversations stopped, footsteps approached, measured, unhurried, confident. Guests leaned forward. My mother whispered excitedly, who is that? I already knew, but I said nothing. Because the real revelation wasn't just who was arriving. It was what their reactions would expose about them. A man stepped through the doorway, tall, composed, dressed in understated elegance rather than flashy wealth. Behind him, assistants carried carefully wrapped boxes. A staff member followed with a case of rare wine. Security greeted him with visible respect. The entire hall shifted. Recognition spread among a few business guests first, then whispers, then sudden silence. My father straightened instantly. My mother's smile widened, calculating. They still didn't understand. Not yet. The man's eyes moved calmly across the room until they landed on me. And for the first time that evening, he smiled. He didn't walk fast. That was the first thing I noticed. No rush, no need to impress, no performance, just quiet certainty. The hall felt smaller as he crossed it. Conversations faded into cautious whispers. Even the engagement music lowered instinctively, like the room itself sensed hierarchy shifting. Behind him, 2 assistants carried wooden cases stamped with International Vineyard seals. Another man followed holding a velvet box, not flashy, just unmistakably expensive. Someone near the entrance whispered, that can't be." Another guest pulled out their phone, suddenly alert. Recognition was spreading. But my parents were focused on something else entirely. Opportunity. My mother stepped forward before anyone else could reach him, her smile polished into social perfection. "Welcome," she said warmly. "You must be one of the groom's distinguished guests." He stopped politely. "Good evening," he replied. His voice was calm, controlled, familiar. My father extended his hand quickly. "I'm Mira's uncle," he said proudly. "Please allow us to host you." Daniel shook his hand courteously, but his eyes never left mine. That tiny detail unsettled me more than anything. He looked relieved, like he had finally arrived somewhere personal. My mother immediately began performing hospitality. "We didn't know someone of your stature was attending," she said. "You came by helicopter? That must have been necessary with traffic." A few relatives gathered closer, eager to attach themselves to importance. Daniel nodded politely. It was the most efficient way to arrive on time. My father laughed approvingly. "A man who values time, excellent." He gestured proudly toward Mira and her fiancé. "Our niece is engaged today. A very respectable alliance." Daniel listened, patient, measured. Then he said gently, "I'm actually here for someone else." The sentence floated in the air. Guests exchanged looks. My mother assumed instantly, "Oh, you must be connected to the groom's business circle." Daniel didn't correct her immediately. Instead, he turned fully toward me and began walking again. Every step felt deliberate. The room followed his movement like gravity had shifted. I stayed still, breathing slow, watching realization approach inch by inch. He stopped in front of me, close enough that the noise of the room disappeared. For a moment, it felt like the rest of the world no longer existed. Then he spoke clearly enough for everyone to hear. "I'm sorry I'm late." Simple words, familiar words, private words now spoken publicly. Gasps rippled through the hall, but my parents laughed, actually laughed. My mother covered her mouth, amused. "Oh, this is sweet," she said loudly. "You're playing along." Several relatives chuckled in agreement. They believed this was staged. A favor, a hired actor helping me save face. My father smiled indulgently. "Sir, you don't have to do this. She sometimes creates stories when she feels pressured." Daniel looked at him calmly. "I'm not playing along." He turned back to me, reached for my hand, and held it naturally, not dramatically, not performatively, like someone who had done it 1,000 times before. Then he said, "I came for my wife." The word dropped into silence. No applause, no shock first, only confusion. My mother blinked twice, then shook her head with a small laugh. "Oh, she convinced you to say that?" My father leaned closer to Daniel. "You're very kind to help her dignity, but this isn't necessary." Someone behind them whispered, "She hired him." Another voice added, "Probably paid." The humiliation didn't stop. It transformed. Now I was desperate enough to stage an elaborate lie. Daniel didn't argue. He simply watched them, observing, learning, exactly the way he always did. My mother crossed her arms. "If you're an actor, we appreciate the effort," she said coldly. "But we value honesty in this family." Daniel tilted his head slightly. "I agree." That unsettled her, because he wasn't defensive. He was calm, certain, unmoved. The mystery deepens. One of the groom's relatives suddenly approached nervously. "Mr. Hale?" he asked. Daniel nodded once. The man's posture changed instantly, respectful, almost deferential. "I didn't realize you were attending personally," he said. "Your office confirmed only representatives." Whispers erupted again. My father frowned. "Hale," he repeated quietly. Recognition flickered but didn't fully form. My mother ignored it. She was focused on protecting her narrative. Turning to the guests, she laughed loudly. "You see, coincidences happen. Same name as some businessman, perhaps." Daniel didn't correct her. He allowed the misunderstanding to breathe, allowed doubt to grow, allowed their certainty to expose itself. My aunt stepped forward aggressively. "Enough theatrics," she said to me. "You embarrassed your parents enough already." My father nodded. "Tell the gentleman thank you and stop this nonsense." He turned to Daniel. "She's been claiming engagement for months. We hoped she would grow out of it." Daniel listened silently, then asked a simple question. "How long have you believed she was lying?" The calmness in his tone made several guests uneasy. My mother answered immediately. "From the beginning." No hesitation, no softness. Daniel nodded slowly. "And during that time, you withdrew financial support?" My father stiffened. "That is family business." Daniel's gaze sharpened slightly. "Family business concerns my wife." The word wife again, firm, undeniable. Still, they refused to accept it. My mother leaned closer to him, lowering her voice but still audible. "If you truly care about her," she said, "you should encourage realistic decisions. She needs stability, not fantasy." She gestured subtly toward Mr. Khanna, the wealthy divorcee still standing nearby. "He represents security." Daniel followed her gesture, looked at the man, then back at her. "I see." His expression didn't change, but something colder entered the room. He turned slightly and motioned to his assistant. The assistant stepped forward and handed my mother a bottle of wine. She accepted it automatically. Her eyes widened at the label. A rare vintage, extremely rare. Her entire demeanor shifted instantly. Greed replaced skepticism. "Oh my," she whispered. My father inspected it quickly, suddenly respectful. "This is extraordinary," Daniel said calmly. "A small gift for the family." They softened immediately. Status spoke louder than truth, yet still they didn't believe me. One of the venue managers rushed toward Daniel nervously. "Sir, your security team asked where you'd like the aircraft relocated." Aircraft, not helicopter, aircraft. The distinction mattered. Guests murmured loudly now. Phones came out. Recognition spread faster. Someone whispered, "That's the Hale Group founder." Another voice, "The Infrastructure Contracts International." My father's face shifted. Confusion, calculation, possibility. But instead of acceptance, he chose denial again. He laughed awkwardly. "Well, successful people enjoy jokes too." My mother nodded eagerly. "Yes, yes, very convincing performance." Daniel finally looked directly at them, not angry, not offended, just clear. He reached into his jacket and removed a small leather folder. Inside were documents, marriage registration, photos, legal certifications. He handed them calmly to my father. The room leaned closer. My father stared. His smile faded. His hands trembled slightly, but even then he said the words, "This must be fabricated." The hall fell completely silent. My mother added quickly, desperate to protect her worldview. "She would never marry without our approval." Daniel's expression softened almost sadly. She didn't need permission to be respected. The engagement hall no longer felt like theirs. Guests who had mocked me moments earlier now avoided eye contact. Whispers changed direction. Not laughter anymore. Reevaluation. My parents stood frozen between pride and disbelief. They couldn't reconcile two truths. The daughter they called a failure and the man standing beside her. Daniel gently squeezed my hand, grounding, steady. Then he turned back to them and said calmly, "I didn't come to prove wealth. I came because she endured humiliation alone tonight." The words landed heavier than any announcement. Still, my mother whispered stubbornly, "I don't believe this." And that was the moment I realized even truth isn't enough for people who built their identity on being right. The room waited, tension thick, because the real shift had not happened yet. Daniel looked toward the entrance again and said quietly, "Bring them in." The doors opened once more, and what entered next would make denial impossible. The doors opened again. This time, no dramatic entrance. Just three people walking in calmly, a senior legal officer, a woman I recognized from Daniel's company board meetings, and a gray-haired man carrying a slim briefcase. No music, no announcement, but something about their presence changed the air completely. Professional, official, unavoidable. My mother's smile began to falter. My father whispered under his breath, "What is this now?" Daniel didn't answer immediately. He simply released my hand long enough to greet them. "Thank you for coming," he said. The older man nodded respectfully. "Of course, Mr. Hale." That title landed harder than anything else. Several guests gasped openly. My aunt grabbed my mother's arm. "Hale, as in Hale Infrastructure." My mother shook her head quickly. "Coincidence." Even now, even after everything, denial was safer than accepting she had humiliated the wrong person. The legal officer opened the briefcase. Documents were placed carefully on a nearby table. Daniel spoke calmly, his voice carrying through the silent hall. "I apologize for turning a private matter into a public moment," he said, "but tonight became public long before I arrived." His eyes moved briefly toward my parents. They stiffened. He continued, These are certified copies of our civil marriage registration, joint property ownership documents, and spousal beneficiary filings submitted 6 months ago. The woman beside him added professionally. All verified and legally recorded. My father laughed nervously. This is unnecessary, he said. Anyone can prepare papers. The legal officer slid forward an embossed certificate. Government seal visible. Witness signatures, dates. Everything undeniable. Guests leaned closer. Whispers spread rapidly. It's real. They're actually married. My mother's voice rose sharply. No, she would have told us. I finally spoke, quietly. I tried. The room turned toward me. My father stared at me. You said you were seeing someone. I said I was engaged, I corrected gently. My mother shook her head frantically. You never introduced him. You refused to meet him unless he provided income statements first. Silence. Someone coughed awkwardly. I continued calmly. You asked for his salary before his name. A few guests lowered their eyes. My aunt whispered, embarrassed. She did say that. My father's tone hardened. You hid your marriage from your family. I nodded once. Yes, because every conversation about my life became a negotiation. My mother snapped back instantly. We only wanted the best for you. I met her gaze. No, you wanted the most impressive version of me. The words didn't sound angry, just factual, and somehow that hurt them more. Daniel stepped slightly back, allowing me space. He wasn't rescuing me now. He was letting me speak. My father tried to regain authority. If this is true, he said stiffly, why pretend poverty? Why let us worry? I answered simply, I never pretended, you assumed. Murmurs spread again. My mother's composure cracked. We cut financial support because you refused respectable matches. Yes, I said softly. You announced that publicly tonight. She faltered, because everyone had heard it, every cruel word, every humiliation. No one laughed now. I took a slow breath. You said I chose an imaginary man over my family. My father looked uncomfortable. You forced that situation. I shook my head gently. No, you made a decision. The words were calm, measured, unemotional. Exactly how they had spoken earlier. I continued. You told me not to come home asking for help. My mother opened her mouth, then closed it, because she remembered saying it. Loudly, proudly, in front of witnesses. Daniel remained silent beside me, watching carefully. This moment belonged to me. I straightened slightly, not dramatic, just steady. I accepted your decision, I said. My father frowned. What decision? I met his eyes fully. The one where you disowned me. The word echoed. Disowned. Guests shifted uncomfortably. My aunt whispered, maybe we should discuss privately. No, my mother interrupted quickly. Family matters stay in family. I nodded. That's what I believed too. A pause. Then I added calmly, but tonight you made it public. The legal officer stepped forward again. Daniel spoke gently. There's one more matter. My parents looked confused. He continued. Several financial arrangements were previously structured, assuming future family inheritance ties. My father stiffened immediately. What arrangements? Daniel answered calmly. Investments made through introductions you requested last year. Recognition dawned slowly. Their expressions changed from confusion to alarm. My father swallowed. You advised those? Yes. Silence stretched. Daniel's voice remained polite. Since you publicly declared your daughter no longer part of your family, those arrangements will now be restructured accordingly. My mother blinked rapidly. What does that mean? The legal officer answered professionally. Partnership privileges connected through marital association are being withdrawn. My father's face paled. You can't do that. Daniel replied evenly. You chose separation. No anger, no revenge tone, just consequence. My mother's voice softened instantly, panic creeping in. Wait, this is misunderstanding. We didn't mean disown. I remained silent. My father turned to me urgently. You know we spoke emotionally. I tilted my head slightly. You seemed very certain earlier. Guests avoided looking at them now. Power had shifted completely. My mother stepped closer to me. Her voice dropped into pleading. Sweetheart, parents say things sometimes. I answered gently, yes, and daughters remember them. She grabbed my hand suddenly. You wouldn't punish us. I didn't pull away, but I didn't squeeze back either. I'm not punishing anyone, I said calmly. I'm respecting your decision. Her grip loosened, because she realized this wasn't revenge, it was acceptance. One of the business guests approached Daniel respectfully. Mr. Hale, your company saved our regional project last year. Daniel nodded politely. Another guest added, we've been trying to secure a meeting with you for months. The room's perception shifted fully. People who mocked me now watched with awe. My parents stood in the middle of that realization. They hadn't rejected a failure. They had rejected stability, respect, loyalty, and a man everyone else desperately wanted access to. I looked at my parents, calm, clear, no anger left. You were right about one thing, I said. They waited. You said I needed to stand independently. My father's shoulders lowered slightly. I have. A quiet pause, then I added. I didn't need wealth to feel valued. I needed respect. And when I didn't receive it here, I built a life where it already existed. My mother's eyes filled. Are you leaving us? I considered the question carefully. I'm accepting the distance you created. Not cruel, not dramatic, just true. Daniel stepped beside me again, offering silent support. My father spoke weakly. We're still your parents. I nodded. Yes. A beat passed. But tonight you chose reputation over relationship. The words settled like final judgment. No applause, no celebration, just heavy silence. Guests returned slowly to conversations, but everything felt different. My parents stood smaller than I had ever seen them, not defeated by revenge, but confronted by consequence. Daniel leaned closer to me. Are you all right? I smiled faintly. For the first time tonight, yes. He offered his arm. We turned toward the exit together. Behind us, whispers followed, not about my failure anymore, about strength, about patience, about the woman who said nothing until truth arrived on its own. As we reached the doors, my mother's voice called out softly. Will you come home? I paused, didn't turn immediately, then answered gently, I already am. And we walked out into the quiet night air. The night air felt different outside the venue, quieter, lighter. The distant hum of the helicopter blades had faded, leaving only soft city sounds and warm evening wind brushing against my face. For several seconds, neither of us spoke. We just walked, side by side, away from the noise, away from years of expectation. Daniel finally exhaled softly beside me. That, he said, almost amused, was more intense than most board negotiations. I laughed for the first time that evening. A real laugh, not polite, not controlled, just relief slipping through. You handled it calmly, he added. I glanced at him. You knew they wouldn't believe you, he nodded. I expected resistance. A small smile appeared on his lips. I didn't expect them to argue with government certificates. I shook my head slightly. They didn't see you. They saw what they already decided I deserved. He didn't answer immediately. Instead, he opened the car door for me, a simple gesture he always did, never performative, never exaggerated. Just consistent, reliable. Inside the car, silence settled comfortably between us. No adrenaline, no triumph. Just calm. The driver pulled away from the venue slowly. Through the window, I could still see lights from the engagement hall shrinking behind us. Daniel reached over gently and took my hand again. Not dramatic, just grounding. You were incredibly strong tonight, he said. I leaned back into the seat. I wasn't strong, I replied. I was tired. He squeezed my fingers softly. Tired people don't stay that composed. I turned toward him. Do you know what hurt the most? He shook his head slightly, inviting honesty. They never once asked if I was happy. The words lingered in the car. Daniel's expression softened. I asked, he said quietly. I smiled. Yes. You always did. We reached home later that night. The villa, not flashy wealth. Just a peaceful house overlooking the city lights, warm, lived-in hours. The moment the door closed behind us, the tension finally left my shoulders. I kicked off my heels dramatically. They are officially banned forever, I declared. Daniel laughed softly. That bad? I rubbed my feet. I survived public disownment. The shoes were the real villains. He disappeared into the kitchen without another word. A minute later, he returned carrying 2 mugs of tea. My favorite, chamomile with honey. I raised an eyebrow. You made tea? He nodded seriously. Emergency protocol. I sat on the couch, exhausted. He placed the mug in my hands and sat beside me, close enough that our shoulders touched. No speeches, no analysis, just warmth. After a moment, he gently pulled me closer, resting my head against his shoulder. The quiet felt safe. Outside, city lights flickered. Inside, everything slowed. I almost told them, I murmured. About us. About how you supported me when I lost that project, how you stayed awake helping me rewrite proposals, how you remember every small thing about me. He smiled faintly. They wouldn't have understood. I looked up at him. And you still came tonight knowing they might insult you. He shrugged lightly. I didn't come to impress them. His thumb brushed absent-mindedly over my hand. I came because you shouldn't stand alone while being hurt. Something inside my chest softened completely. No grand romance. No dramatic declarations, just presence, steady love. I leaned closer and whispered, teasing slightly, you know, arriving by helicopter was very theatrical. He looked genuinely confused. It was the fastest route. I laughed again. That laugh felt like healing. He watched me carefully, like he always did when checking whether I was truly okay. Then he reached forward and tucked a loose strand of hair behind my ear. Small gesture, gentle, familiar. Are you sad? He asked quietly. I thought about it, the humiliation, the years of pressure, the words failure and disappointment echoing in memory. Then I shook my head. No, a pause. I think I'm free. He smiled, not proud, not triumphant, just relieved. And for a moment, we sat there sharing tea, feet tucked under a blanket, laughing softly about how shocked my aunt's face had been. A normal moment. A peaceful moment. The kind of happiness that never needed witnesses. In the weeks that followed, messages began arriving. Relatives checking in, some apologizing, some pretending nothing had happened. My parents called several times. At first, I didn't answer, not out of anger, but because silence was finally mine to choose. Eventually, I met them for coffee. No confrontation, no dramatic reconciliation, just distance. They spoke carefully now, measured, respectful in a way they had never been before. The power dynamic had changed permanently. They no longer evaluated me. They listened. Healing didn't look like revenge. It looked like boundaries. And peace. What I learned that night wasn't about proving Daniel's wealth. It wasn't about humiliation returning to its source. It was about something quieter. People reveal their real values when they believe you have nothing to offer them. My parents believed I had no status, so they showed exactly how conditional their support had always been. And once I saw that clearly, I stopped needing their approval. Justice wasn't the helicopter. It wasn't the documents. It wasn't even their shock. Justice was realizing I had already built a life where love didn't need qualification. Sometimes people ask if I forgave them. The truth, forgiveness wasn't a single moment. It was learning to stop chasing validation from people who only valued appearances. Peace came later, quietly, like that night on the couch with tea in my hands and Daniel beside me, when I realized I no longer felt small. And now I want to ask you something. If you were in my place, would you have forgiven your parents after they publicly disowned you? Or would you have walked away completely? I really want to know what you think. And if you liked the story, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to my channel. It motivates us to bring more such stories.